Christopher Ruoccio's book, The Empire Silence, this book. It's grand. Hi, I'm Anna from Post Me a Book. And in this clip, I'm just going to go through, this Wednesday clip, I'm just going to go through some of the books that I'm reading and just one that I'm planning on reading and explain why this is called Wednesday Stumblings. It's been tough trying to keep up with my goal of doing a clip first. It was on Sunday. I think I've said this before. First it was on a Sunday, and then it was Sunday, Wednesday, and then perhaps Sunday, Wednesday, Friday. I probably should have just skipped to Sunday because really, I'm not even sticking to anything. I have just fallen off the wagon completely trying to find time to fit in a clip on any day. But I've made it to Wednesday after a break, let's say. Won't call it a short break. It feels like forever, and it probably is forever. Probably was Halloween, actually, because I think I did a clip for Halloween. And I'm going to actually talk about that book. But now that I'm here, I thought I will just update on this one. I'm going to do another update on it. Because I've actually started this book, and I have to say, I call it grand. I know people have described this book as grand and as an epic and compared it to Dune, which I've never read. And I get this, actually. This book is grand. It is an epic. It's science fiction. It goes from planet to planet. And the writer, this author, I should say that I find this book very immersive. The story of Hadrian, who is the protagonist, he really draws you in. And although I won't say that it's as though I'm looking through the eyes of Hadrian, I feel as though I'm right there. I'd have to compare Christopher Ruocchio. I still don't know whether I pronounced that right, but anyway, whether I have to compare his writings to, or his way of describing, to Ursula Le Guin, whose descriptions or whose books I find, she describes them so vividly that I really see the picture. I love Ursula Le Guin's way of describing. Even when I started reading one of her books. Now I'm rambling onto something else, off topic. But even when I read one of her books in Swedish, I found that the translation really also brought the picture into my head. And I'm not that good at reading Swedish. So I was well impressed. But I do love Ursula Le Guin's way of describing. And I have to say, yep, also his. I'm at about chapter 24, which isn't even a third of the way. But the story, the way this author describes Hadrian's story, he does take you step by step by step, but not in a boring way. At least in my opinion, not in a boring way at all. And I feel when I read it, I have to read each sentence. And I do have to add again, not in a boring way, but just because I feel I'm going to miss something if I don't. He is so good so far. And I'm sure it's going to be good to the end because it is also very easy to read. It's so, as I think I said before, that this is one book which surprised me because when I've said before that I don't feel I'm a person who can sit down and read a book in one go. This one tests that, I have to say. Good book so far. Very surprised. The story so far, Hadrian is the protagonist and he was born into an aristocratic family. His father is a lord, Lord Arthur Marlowe, I think it is, and he lords over a lot of people and he lords over other planets. He's a bit of a harsh leader, unwielding and harsh and kind of torturer, if you'd like to call it that. He really has no time for people who just put you to death if you step out of line kind of thing, or strip you and get you whipped. And they live on the planet Earth. Hadrian, who's the oldest son, he has a brother who's called Crispin, who's several years younger than him. But Hadrian thought that he's going to be next in line to his dad, although this is something that he actually doesn't really want to be, because for him, he's more merciful. He feels that the way his father rules is completely wrong and that people shouldn't be treated like this. He has a tutor, Gibson I think is called, who he feels is the closest person to him than he's ever had. He's certainly not close to his father. And his mother is a bit distant, but we discover a bit into the book that Hadrian's picture of her is different. She's distant and they hardly meet her, but she's not as distant as he thinks. Crispin, his brother, he has no love for. And I feel sorry for his brother because I feel Hadrian actually should treat him better. But his brother is a bit more like his dad, but that aside, he's quite young. And his brother he's the one who's going to, or so it seems, he's the one who's going to take over from his father when Hadrian does something wrong. But as I said, Hadrian has never actually followed his dad's footsteps or his father's footsteps. So in the end, it was probably never going to happen. But no, he didn't think that Crispin was going to be the one to take over. We discover that Crispin, although he's the tougher and more ruthless of the brothers, not tougher in the sense of strength, but just in the sense of how he treats people, he also doesn't really want to be his father's right hand. So that's why I also feel sorry for Crispin. He's put in a situation where he's the mold, but he doesn't really want the role. So anyway, Hadrian, he thinks he's going to be the right hand, ends up not being somewhere quite soon in the books, and not much of a giveaway, but yeah, a little bit of a giveaway. So far in the book, he decides, because he does something wrong, and his father decides that he's got to then be moved from the planet Earth onto a different place and into a different a religious group where he's going to learn how to be a kind of torturer, I guess, or keep people in line. But he really doesn't want to do that. So he plots to escape and find his own path, and he gets help from his tutor Gibson, and he manages to escape. And that's where I'm at. He's escaped from the planet. He gets stuck onto another planet, which he didn't really, it wasn't as he planned, let's say, but that's where he is just now. And it's all quite different. He's lost all his royalty or his aristocracy. He's now poor. Nobody knows who he is. He has a ring which can tell his birth, but he don't use this because if he uses this ring, it's got information in it. If he uses the information in this ring, it's going to flag up so that his father knows where he is, and that could lead to consequences that he doesn't want. So he doesn't do anything with his ring, although he's got it. So now he's on this other planet called Imesh, where he's completely poor, nobody knows him, no money, starving every other day, him not every day. And that's where he's at. He's trying to find his path, but so far he hasn't. And I guess I'll find out a bit more when I read a bit more. But very good book so far. So that's that one, Emperor of Silence. This one, and it's a trilogy, I think. Or is it a trilogy? No, it's perhaps more than that. Perhaps it's 6 books. Anyway, this is the first book of The Sun Eater, book 1. Good book. And then I was reading, I have to bring this one up, and although it's not Halloween, I do have to give this another thumbs up, because still quite M.R. James collected ghost books. He's very good at keeping suspense. I've just read another story which is called The Rose Garden, and he starts off very well, I have to say. And I said, with short stories, he manages to pull you right in, M.R. James. And in the first page, it's not so much that it's very exciting. So it just starts off with a conversation with this couple, and the wife is telling her husband if he could go and do certain chores. And there's also humor in these books or in these stories. And the husband saying, "But I was planning to," and she says, "How about, can't you do that another day?" And so he agrees to do that. So he does what his wife wants, which is to go past, I think it was a house that they're looking at, and then there's a rose garden there. So this story is called The Rose Garden, and they hire someone to sort out the rose garden, and there's a post, as in a wooden post, that is pulled up, and they shouldn't have done that, but they did that. So things happen when they pull up this post, and the husband, and I can't quite remember, but somehow the husband, he has dreams. And the strange thing about these dreams, his wife, who had spoken to the woman who was selling the place that they now live at, she had told, the husband's called George, let me give them names. She had told George's wife a story that she remembered from when she was a child. She remembered coming to this house and there was something that she didn't like about it. And she had a brother called Frank. And one day she and Frank, when they were young, were running around. And then Frank had disappeared somewhere in the garden. So she went around looking for Frank, and she found him sleeping on a chair, and on a bench chair in the garden. And when she woke him up, he was in such a state, but he didn't say in the beginning what it was that put him in such a state. So then it turns out that he told a story that was quite chilling, that he remembered that Frank was a child, but he remembered from his dream that he was in court, and there was someone who was accusing him of things that he had done and trying to pin things on him and asking him why had he written these stories. And this woman, who's now telling the story, Mrs. Wixton, she says, well, of course, Frank couldn't have told the story like this because he was only a child, so he couldn't have been making it up. So the strange thing was, after that day when George's wife heard this story, her husband then seemed to dream exactly the same thing that Mrs. Wixton's brother had experienced. So then it becomes a bit of a, uh-oh. Oh, I won't tell the whole story. I think that's enough. And the stories are quite short, actually. So they're very, very... I read this one this evening, that story. So it just goes to show it doesn't take long at all. But he does build up suspense. So I look forward to reading more of these books, even if it's no longer Halloween. Halloween helped to get me to read this book, which had been sitting on the shelf forever. So, another good book. And the last book, which is not one that I've started, it's called, let's see if you can see it, The Usual Glare, Wizard of the Crow? Wizard of the Crow by Ngugi Thiongo. Now, let me start again. Ngugi Thiongo was a Kenyan author, and one of the big authors of his time. I've never read any of his books, and this one I have no idea what it's about, apart from when I read what it says here. Let's see, it says about this book. Well, I can tell you now, it says, first of all, in exile for more than 20 years, Ngugi Thiongo has become one of the most widely read contemporary African writers. The power and scope of his work garnering him international attention and praise. His aim in Wizard of the Crow is, in his own words, nothing less than to sum up Africa of the 20th century in the context of global forces of world history. What I understand from this book also is that there's a bit of what do they call it? Magical fantasy, I think. Commencing in our times and set in Free Republic of Aburira, the novel dramatizes with corrosive humor and keenness of observation a battle for control of the souls of the Aburinian people. Fashioning the stories of the powerful and the ordinary into a dazzling mosaic, Ngugi reveals humanity in all its ceaseless, surprising complexities. I borrowed this book a long time ago, been sitting on these shelves a long time. They'll probably be asking for it back if they hadn't already, but I do want to read this. And I have to say, although I thought Emperor of Silence was long, I think this one is even longer. At least Emperor of Silence, the print is a bit bigger, and but it could be easy. It could actually be not as long as I think. It won't take me, perhaps it won't take me as long as I suspect it would take, because I'm actually quite surprised that this one's going quite easily. Yeah, without any obstacles in the way. I don't get much time to read it. I do read it a little bit at bedtime. I thought I'd have more time, but there you go. As I said, no more expectations of how long books are going to take me, but it is actually going seamlessly, this one. So who knows? Perhaps this one, when I get started, will also do the same. as I was saying, Ngugi, I'll have to practice that one. I haven't read any of his books, and I was listening to Florens from one one more podcast or one more book podcast, I think it is, and she was talking about she had read a book by him, and she was describing a little bit about the author, and I thought, ah, really? When you suddenly learn something about someone or something. I had that oh really moment, and I thought I really must read that book. But I have been meaning to read this book because, as far as I knew about this author, he was more um, even in this book, he is trying to get something across. There is a moral or tale to tell from most of these authors, especially from those times in Africa. But this one seems to be a bit more. Perhaps it sounds as though it might be a little bit easier because it's it's enfolded into both what could be reality but enfolded into a story. So that sounds quite interesting. So I'm actually looking forward to this one. I'll see if I get to it after. Oh, I don't know now. I don't know when I'll get to this one. I'll have to fit it in because I don't want to read this one. So perhaps I'll read it with the next group of books. I'll have to think about that one. But I'm actually looking forward to reading this one also. But I think that's it, really. I only had those 3 books to take up, and they're all feeling quite exciting, I have to say. I'm also impressed by this one. I had to take it up a 3rd time because I am quite surprised that it's enjoyable. I was going to say readable, but that would be a bit of an understatement. It would not quite mean what I want to say, which it's enjoyable. So until next time, who knows? It might be until Sunday this time. Perhaps I'll get out a clip by Sunday, or even by Friday. Who knows? But yeah, until next time. Thank you for watching until the end. Like and comment, or comment anyway. I will try. I will be better at replying to comments. I've seen that some have disappeared, but I'll do my best to comment because that is the very least I can do when people actually write comments. So until next time, bye bye.